The Bible. From Koine Greek tar biblia. Tar biblia. The books. Is a collection of religious texts or scriptures sacred in Christianity, Judaism, Samaritanism, and many other religions. The Bible is an anthology, a compilation of texts of a variety of forms, originally written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Koine Greek. These texts include instructions, stories, poetry, and prophecies, among other genres. The collection of materials that are accepted as part of the Bible by a particular religious tradition or community is called a biblical canon. Believers in the Bible generally consider it to be a product of divine inspiration. While understanding what that means in different ways, the origins of the oldest writings of the Israelites are lost to antiquity. The religious texts were compiled by different religious communities into various official collections. The earliest contained the first 5 books of the Bible, called the Torah, which was accepted as Jewish canon by the 5th century BCE. A second collection of narrative histories and prophecies was canonized in the 3rd century BCE. A third collection containing Psalms, Proverbs, and narrative histories was canonized sometime between the 2nd century BCE and the 2nd century CE. The transmission history of these combined collections spans approximately 3,000 years. And there is no scholarly consensus as to when the Jewish Hebrew Bible canon was settled in its present form. Some scholars argue that it was fixed by the Hasmonean dynasty, 140–40 BCE, while others argue it was not fixed until the 2nd century CE or even later. The Dead Sea Scrolls are approximately dated to 250 BCE 100 CE and are the oldest existing copies of the books of the Hebrew Bible. Tanakh is an alternate term for the Hebrew Bible composed of the first letters of the 3 parts of the Hebrew Scriptures: the Torah, teaching; the Nevi'im, prophets; and the Ketuvim, writings. The Torah is also known as the Pentateuch. The Masoretic text, in Hebrew and Aramaic, is considered the authoritative text by Rabbinic Judaism. The Septuagint, a Koine Greek translation from the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, largely overlaps with the Hebrew Bible. Christianity began as an outgrowth of Judaism. Using the Septuagint as the basis of the Old Testament, the early Church continued the Jewish tradition of writing and incorporating what it saw as inspired, authoritative religious books. The Gospels, Pauline epistles and other texts coalesced into the New Testament very early. In the first 3 centuries CE, the concept of a closed canon emerged in response to heretical writings in the 2nd century. The list of books included in the Catholic Bible was established as canon by the Council of Rome in 382, followed by those of Hippo in 393 and Carthage in 397. Christian biblical canons range from the 73 books of the Catholic Church canon and the 66-book canon of most Protestant denominations, to the 81 books of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church canon, among others. With estimated total sales of over 5 billion copies, the Bible is widely considered to be the best-selling publication of all time. It has had a profound influence both on Western culture and history and on cultures around the globe. Simply put, the Bible is the most influential book of all time. The study of the Bible through biblical criticism has indirectly impacted culture and history as well. The Bible is currently translated or being translated into about half of the world's languages. Development. The Bible is not a single book. It is a collection of books whose complex development is not completely understood. The oldest books began as songs and stories orally transmitted from generation to generation before being written down. The Bible was written and compiled by many people, some of whom are unknown, from a variety of disparate cultures. British biblical scholar John K. Richards wrote, He biblical texts were produced over a period in which the living conditions of the writers, political, cultural, economic, and ecological, varied enormously. There are texts which reflect a nomadic existence, texts from people with an established monarchy and temple cult, texts from exile, texts born out of fierce oppression by foreign rulers, courtly texts, texts from wandering charismatic preachers, texts from those who give themselves the airs of sophisticated Hellenistic writers. It is a time span which encompasses the compositions of Homer, Plato, Aristotle, Thucydides, Sophocles, Caesar, Cicero, and Catullus. It is a period which sees the rise and fall of the Assyrian Empire, 12th to 7th century, and of the Persian Empire, 6th to 4th century. Alexander's campaigns, 336 to 326. The rise of Rome and its domination of the Mediterranean, 4th century to the founding of the Principate, 27 BCE. The destruction of the Jerusalem Temple, 70 CE, and the extension of Roman rule to parts of Scotland, 84 CE. The age of the original composition of the texts is difficult to determine and heavily debated. Using a combined linguistic and historiographical approach, Hendel and Joosten date the oldest parts of the Hebrew Bible, the Song of Deborah in Judges chapter 5 and the Samson story of Judges 16 and 1 Samuel, to having been composed in the premonarchical Early Iron Age, c. 1200 BC to c. 550 BC, considered to be scriptures, sacred, authoritative religious texts. The books were compiled by different religious communities into various biblical canons. Official collections of scriptures. The earliest compilation, containing the first 5 books of the Bible and called the Torah, meaning, law, instruction, or teaching, or Pentateuch, 5 books, was accepted as Jewish canon by the 5th century BCE. A second collection of narrative histories and prophecies, called the Nevi'im, prophets, was canonized in the 3rd century BCE. A third collection called the Ketuvim, writings, containing psalms, proverbs, and narrative histories, was canonized sometime between the 2nd century BCE and the 2nd century CE. These 3 collections were written mostly in Biblical Hebrew, with some parts in Aramaic, which together form the Hebrew Bible or Tanakh, an abbreviation of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. Greek-speaking Jews in Alexandria and elsewhere in the Jewish diaspora considered additional scriptures, composed between 200 BCE and 100 CE and not included in the Hebrew Bible, to be canon. These additional texts were included in a translation of the Hebrew Scriptures into Koine Greek, Common Greek spoken by ordinary people, known as the Septuagint, which began as a translation of the Torah made around 250 BCE and continued to develop for several centuries. The Septuagint contained all of the books now in the Hebrew Bible, reorganized and with some textual differences, with additional scriptures interspersed throughout. The Masoretes began developing the authoritative Hebrew and Aramaic text of the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible in Rabbinic Judaism near the end of the Talmudic period. circa 300 c. 500 CE, but the actual date is difficult to determine. In the 6th and 7th centuries, 3 Jewish communities contributed systems for writing the precise letter text, with its vocalization and accentuation known as the Massorah, from which we derive the term Masoretic. In the 7th century,